everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about my breastfeeding journey. And just so you know, before I start, it's basically from birth to when Arthur was 5 months, because that is actually when he started fully and exclusively breastfeeding at the breast. So in this video I'm going to cover everything in those first 5 months plus a little bit after as well, and I'm going to cover tongue ties, bottle feeding, expressing, formula feeding, breast aversion, bottle aversion and feeding aversions. So if you are going through any of those issues and challenges, I really hope that this video helps you in some way and also that it provides some hope to you. I know struggling with breastfeeding, and if you are having any of those sorts of issues, can be really tough and hard. It is very tough, and I don't think many people really understand that. But if you just want kind of a little glimmer of hope, then my breastfeeding journey does end on a very positive note, and my son Arthur is actually 1 and we are still breastfeeding now. However, just a disclaimer, if you haven't had a baby yet and if you're pregnant and are thinking about breastfeeding, this might not be the best video for you, because I really don't want it to put you off breastfeeding. Obviously, I did have some really difficult times when we were trying to breastfeed, but not everyone does have that, so I just wanted to say that as well. There are lots of positive breastfeeding stories, so I don't want this to put anyone off. But yeah, if you are struggling, then I really hope this video provides some sort of help or reassurance to you. Also, just to say, I'm not an expert at all. This is purely just my experiences and what I have gone through and what I've learned through what people have told me and just through living through it. Also, I just want to say that my stance, kind of the position that I'm coming from, is that I'm really proud that I'm breastfeeding. I love breastfeeding, and that's kind of my stance on it, if that makes sense. So if I just take you back to before I had the baby, who is called Arthur, if you don't know already, I really wanted to breastfeed more than anything. It was just something that I'm really passionate about. My mum breastfed, my sister breastfeeds, and it's something that I really wanted to do. When I fell pregnant, I did just have this kind of little, I guess I was anxious throughout my pregnancy anyway about various things, but I also was a little bit anxious about breastfeeding. And when the health visitor came to introduce herself before he was born, she said, "Do you have any worries at all?" And I said, "The only thing that I'm worried about is breastfeeding." And it wasn't because I was worried, you know, like it might hurt, or I was worried that I wouldn't like it. It was just, I was worried that there would be a reason why I wouldn't be able to breastfeed. I also only wanted to breastfeed, so I wasn't interested in expressing milk, I wasn't interested in formula feeding, I wasn't interested in bottle feeding, I wasn't interested in dummies. I just thought that breastfeeding was going to be kind of the be-all and end-all, that I wouldn't need any of that, and I didn't want any of that either. And obviously I'm not against any other forms of feeding, bottle feeding or formula feeding or dummies even, but that's just kind of my position on it. I was just really passionate about breastfeeding, and that's all I wanted to do. So I just want to say, I do have my notebook here with my notes, so I'm really sorry if there's some kind of like pauses or if you see me looking down, but it's just been, as you can imagine, such a long journey, 5 months worth that I've kind of tried to write down. I also have documented quite a lot of my breastfeeding journey over on Instagram, so do go and follow me and you can have a little look. I've got a highlight reel called My Breastfeeding Journey, so you can have a look through that if you wish, and I've also got a few posts on my grid too. And whilst we're talking about that kind of thing, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy motherhood and mum life content. So I really aim for my channel to be a very positive place, but also I want to kind of document motherhood honestly too, hence why I'm filming this video. But yes, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. Okay, anyway, so this video has taken me such a long time to film. Obviously it's quite raw, especially kind of a few months ago, you know, and now is fine, you know, I don't mind talking about it too much. However, having said that, because whilst I have been preparing my notes and thinking about it, it has brought up a few like emotions and a few frustrations again, but I kind of feel more ready to talk about it now. And yeah, I just really hope that it helps someone out there. Like if you're watching this, I just really hope that it gives you some sort of hope. And yeah, anyway, I'll get straight into it. So when Arthur was born, it was very positive birth, which I've filmed my positive birth story, so that was all really good. It all went kind of exactly according to plan. You know, if I could have written it, that's how it would have gone, sort of thing. Afterwards, they kind of, when I was on the floor, they, you know, examined him and me, and they kind of put him to me. He didn't really kind of go to the breast. The midwife was just like, oh well, like never mind, sort of thing. And then we were left in that room for, I don't know how long, it probably was bound to have been like 6 hours or so, I think. In that time, the midwives did kind of struggle to get him to feed. Eventually, he managed to breastfeed whilst I was lying down on my side. Now, looking back, obviously they didn't stay to watch, so I was in that position for, I think it was around 20 minutes, and looking back, kind of knowing what I know now, and obviously I know how breastfeeding feels, I'm not convinced he was actually feeding. I don't know, was it at all or a bit, but I'm pretty sure he probably wasn't feeding for all of that time. I think he was probably just asleep for most of it. Obviously, I didn't know. First time mum, I felt like I knew loads about breastfeeding, but kind of obviously practically when you're doing it, it's a bit different than kind of reading about it and hearing about it. So anyway, the midwife changed over and another midwife came in and she said, you know, we just need to see one more breastfeed and then you can go home. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, that's sudden, but okay. But she said, yeah, so just pull the bell, you know, when he wants to come for another feed and we'll observe it and then that'll be it. But he didn't go to the breast for another feed, and I was trying to think back, it's so hard to remember, but I think he was just quite sleepy even at that point, which I guess is probably normal for a newborn. But yeah, he never really went to me. I don't ever think he kind of really woke up for me to put him in that position. So eventually I got into my own room. I was quite lucky in some ways that I had my own private room. And yeah, obviously he still hadn't a feed. I think it was around probably like 10, 11 a.m. and he was born at about 4 a.m. in the morning. And eventually they said, okay, obviously he hasn't had another feed, so we are going to have to express some colostrum and just give it to him in a syringe. And obviously you can imagine at that point I was a bit like, oh my gosh, like, is he not feeding? What's wrong? But it was still early days and all the staff were kind of like, you know, don't worry, it just takes a bit longer sometimes, you know, it's a very natural thing, breastfeeding, but it doesn't mean it's kind of like a natural thing for the baby to do it straight away sort of thing. They said this can happen. So yeah, they helped me to express colostrum into a syringe and then they kind of like left us to it, and they had showed me and my husband how to do it, but I mean, if you've not done it before, it's really hard. So I was trying to like express it and my husband was trying to catch it in the syringe and it was just like impossible. So we called the staff in, and I must admit some of the hospital staff were really, really good, but some of them left a bit to be desired, and they were like, someone came in and she said, oh yeah, you know, I'll be back, and she didn't come back. And to be honest with you, I don't really think he probably had enough feed, probably for the first even couple of days looking back now. So Arthur was eventually diagnosed with jaundice. His levels weren't so high that they needed treatment, which was obviously good, but they weren't low enough that we could go home either, plus obviously the feeding issues. But I do think that kind of both played a role in it. So I remember there was one time where I couldn't wake him up. He was very, very sleepy in hospital, like kind of quite scarily so, like I could not wake him. And anyway, I woke, obviously they told me to like, he needed feeding every 3 hours, and I couldn't wake him up about 4 a.m. Yeah, one of the like care assistants came in and she said, oh, don't worry, you know, if he wants to sleep, let him sleep. And I was like, oh, okay, like if you think that's right, okay. And I'm so annoyed at myself. If I obviously knew what I know now, I wouldn't have kind of taken that. I would have said, no, like, please help me wake him up. He needs to have a feed. Because the next day or that morning later on, his jaundice levels had spiked again. So I definitely think kind of his non-feeding and jaundice definitely kind of, there was a correlation between them. But anyway, on a day, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was the full first day or maybe the second day, after the day after he was born, a midwife looked in his mouth with a torch and she said, I think I can see a tongue tie. So, you know, that would explain, obviously, potentially why he's not able to feed, because they had been trying to get him on the breast and he would just be getting really, really upset and just couldn't, like, you know, his mouth might open but he just wasn't sucking, he just wasn't really doing anything. So she looked and thought she saw a tongue tie, so she called the kind of tongue tie, the feeding midwife, feeding expert, I can't remember her exact title, but she came, she said, yes, there's one, she snipped it, and she said, you know, you should see an improvement sort of thing. And you can imagine, obviously, one part of me was very worried and it was quite sad that he had a tongue tie. It's obviously not very nice, but kind of probably the bigger part of me was like, oh good, like at least they found the problem, you know, he can have it cut, that's the solution, and then we'll be off, like we'll be breastfeeding. Unfortunately, that didn't work, so it didn't change anything really, and we were still in hospital. We actually were in hospital for around, I think it was 6 full days that we were in. And obviously on day 3 or 4, whenever it was, obviously my milk started to come in, and the midwife came in and she said, right, you know, we need to like get you expressing and basically, you know, I guess the colostrum was like changing into like full milk. Syringes kind of weren't enough anymore, so she like brought in this big like breast pump on wheels and all the bottles and all the pumps, and I was just a bit like, oh my god, like never really seen any of that before. I didn't really know anything about it. And I said, you know, what about, won't he kind of get bottle preference? Because I read about that, especially when they're newborn. You know, you don't want to give them a bottle straight away if you want them to breastfeed, because then he'll develop a preference with the bottle. And I was thinking, god, like what if I can never get him on the breast after that? And I suggested or asked if I could use a cup, because I had heard of that. So she went away and asked someone senior, and they basically said no, we couldn't do cup feeding. I'm not really sure why, because I've read that you can do that, but you know, you're in hospital. So I said, okay, if that's their kind of guidelines or policy. So yeah, I had to start expressing and then obviously feeding with a bottle. Now I must say, over the near a week that we were in a hospital, I think he kind of fed like fully from me 3 times, and all of those were actually led down. But funny enough, kind of when we were in the cradle position, like he would not go on this side, he would only go on this side. And yeah, so it did mean I was quite engorged on one side, which was obviously very uncomfortable. So that was kind of always playing on my mind, like, am I going to get like mastitis, or is my supply? Although I probably wasn't even worried about my supply, because I probably didn't even really understand it at that point. I didn't really get expressing, I didn't know what I had to do. They just kind of told me, you know, what you want to express like so many times a day and feed him every 3 hours. They didn't, I don't feel they probably knew like loads about expressing. I've learned so much more now having done it for such a long time. But yeah, so I was just kind of left to bottle feed him every 3 hours, and it was so tough in hospital, like so, especially overnight. Obviously, you know, he's newborn, didn't like being put down, so I had to try and put him down to express, and he would wake up and cry. So I kind of had to like hold him on one arm, like express one side, then like try and swap, and then you've kind of got to go to the other little like kitchen and try and sterilise all the parts. And obviously I was trying to learn like how to put all the pumps together and stuff. It was just a whole new world for me. And obviously the whole time I'm there with my kind of newborn baby who I just want to like cuddle and absorb, but I was kind of just so worried, thinking like, why isn't he breastfeeding? Like what's going to happen? It was just such a horrible time. So the midwives carried on helping me feed, and like I said, some of them were brilliant. They would like really persist. Some of them was kind of just calm and like be like, oh yeah, like it looks like you're doing it fine, you know, don't worry, you know, it just takes a bit longer. And then a really good midwife was like, right, okay, you know, she got him feeding. Her shift was ending, so she said, right, I want you to like get the midwives or the care assistants to like help you. Also, you know, you could try the same side, a different side, the same position. And the shift changed, and the next midwife didn't really do much at all, to be honest. So yeah, it was really tough, and I felt like maybe I wasn't given kind of all the support I could have done. Some of them were very kind of nice to me and saying, you know, you're doing really well, like, you know, most people probably would have given up by now. And I was like, well, you know, this is only like early days, like he wasn't even a week old. Of course I want to carry on trying, but it was so sad because he would just get so distressed. And it's really hard because you want them to breastfeed, but at the same time, like later on a health visitor told me, keep the breasts a happy place. I think that's such a good tip. Like if your baby is getting so distressed, like it's really not good to like keep trying. But obviously I hated giving the bottle, like that first bottle feed. I think the midwife actually did it, the first one. I just like hated seeing it, because I just really, I've not got anything against bottle feeding like for other people, but I just really didn't want that. So it was really hard seeing him have a bottle in his mouth. To me it just didn't look like right. I just really didn't like it. I also had quite a few unhelpful comments from the staff, and I think most of them weren't from the midwives themselves, it's from the care assistants. Like one said, because I said I'd been like lying down, I said, can you help me like feed? And she was, oh well, you know, you can't do that position going around Asda, can you? Like, not very helpful. Obviously it's more important just to help him feed, however in position, then we can change to other positions. And the same one, like he was upset, and it looked like he had wanted to go on me. So I said, I called, it was her, I said, can you help? She said, oh well, he's just had a feed, he's probably not hungry. And obviously breastfeeding isn't just for hunger, is it? It is for comfort. He's newborn, he probably did want to go on the breast. And yeah, like I said, there was one that kind of didn't help me waking up and said, let's just leave him for like 6 hours without a feed when he had jaundice. That was really bad. And another one that was said about Asda and sideline also was kind of like putting down breastfeeding and saying, oh, like it's easier to bottle feed, like, you know, your husband can help out. Yeah, so I don't think we were treated that well. I mean, looking back, actually, it probably scarred me more then I realised, you know, kind of when you think about it, I had such a positive birth. It was such a come down, like from that, which went really, really well, to obviously him not breastfeeding, but then also like all these kind of negative comments. It was really, really hard. But anyway, on day 6, like the full 6th day, we actually got home at about 10:30 at night. I wasn't really happy about that either. They basically said we weren't going to be going home that day because his jaundice levels had gone back. Then he had another test in the evening. Oh, they've come down a bit, you can go home. And I was like, oh, well, but he just had a spike. Like, surely it's not safe. But we just had to go back to hospital the next day to test it. So I just said, can I not just stay the night anyway? But no, they kind of wanted me to go home. So anyway, we got home. So I think the kind of last day we were in hospital, I kind of had managed to get him on the breast myself. I kind of just given up at that point, like asking, I still asked for help, but they just weren't that helpful. I kind of just was trying to do it myself, which obviously, you know, is right. Obviously I had to be independent, I'm the mum sort of thing. Yeah, I had managed to get him on a few times, but as I said, was he feeding? I don't know. But anyway, we got home. I definitely managed to get him breastfeeding because I heard that, like, that suck swallow pattern. It kind of sounds like a train if you breastfeed, you know what I mean? You can kind of like tell when they're feeding. But it was so difficult. Like, it was so straight. It would take like probably about half an hour, which looking back again, it's probably too long. I shouldn't have like let it go on that long, but he could just not like latch on and start feeding. He just, I don't know what it was, just couldn't. Now, I'd had an appointment from a midwife, and she, like I said, he was only going on one side still because one side he just couldn't take at all. And she told me to only express that side 4 times a day, which I don't think is enough, because obviously he was, so say, like feeding like, you know, 8 times or more on one side, so obviously should have been doing the other one 8 times at least as well. So that kind of caused a bit of an issue probably with my supply to begin with. And yeah, and then like at 2 weeks old, he was discharged from the community midwives onto the health visitors, and I don't think the health visitor a bit later on was very happy about that because he still wasn't at his birth weight. So he lost 9% in hospital. You know, they weigh him on like, is it day 3 or day 5? And usually, I think like if it goes under 10%, more than 10%, I'm not sure what they do. I don't know if they might have like had to supplement him with formula or something. I'm not really sure. So yeah, he lost a lot of his birth weight and he still hadn't put that on. Also, as I said, because I wasn't expecting to bottle feed and express, I had no clue, no idea. I literally, my sister kind of knew a bit. Me and my husband had to like, well, I wasn't really in a position to. My husband had to like go on Amazon and just like buy a breast pump, buy some bottles, buy a steriliser. Like, didn't really have any idea, any clue. It was just all a bit of a panic. So whilst we were still under the community midwife, so I think this was before he was 2 weeks old. Yes, before he was 2 weeks old. I did go to see a midwife. She helped me, like he did manage to latch on like in a rugby ball. I felt good, you know, this is good. She gave me some more like advice. So I thought, okay, you know, we'll try it. But a few days later, I was just like, I had enough. I thought, this isn't right. It's just so tough. Like, and he gets so upset. It's just really, really horrible. So I actually found the number for the woman that had cut his tongue tie in hospital. So we went to see her, which was brilliant. She kind of had a look at his mouth and just, oh, you know, still healing. And again, she was like, you know, try the laid back position, you know, help him find his way. It's just taking a bit longer. And then whilst we were there, he needed a feed. So we went to a private room, and the appointment had kind of finished, but she'd come in. I don't know if it was just to kind of like, oh, like see how you're doing whilst you're here sort of thing. I can't remember. But anyway, she luckily noticed like how tough it was, had another look, obviously a bit of a better look, and she said, oh yeah, actually he does still have a tongue tie. There is still one there. It's further back. It's quite thick. And so a few days later, he was around 2 weeks old, we went back to her and she cut that. So that was his second tongue tie cut, like poor thing. After that, he wouldn't, like straight away as he had it cut, he wouldn't go on the breast. So obviously he was already distressed because he just had that. So we gave him the bottle, but it took such a long time. So eventually like we just went home, because we kind of stayed around in the hospital to kind of like try to get a bit of milk down him. We went home, and that first bottle feed, it took 1.5 hours for him to have a feed, and obviously usually it would take like 5 minutes, which was also an issue. He would just down his bottles, but after the second cut, it was just like he couldn't do it. Obviously it was painful, obviously his tongue was probably all like loose, obviously trying to get used to it. So I kind of messaged her, and she just said as long as he has kind of like the minimum, it was like 400 something millilitres of milk a day, like that's okay, just make sure that he has that. But it was so hard to do, and he also would not go back on the breast. So this continued for however long, and he just would not go on me, and bottle feeding was obviously quite difficult too. And obviously the whole time I'm thinking, the more he has the bottle and like the more time goes on and he's not going on the breast, like he is going to not want to go back on, you know, he's totally going to get a bottle preference. And I just had that kind of hanging over me. So me and my husband were like pretty struggling, you know, at this point. My husband had to go back to work. I think Arthur maybe was about like 2.5 weeks old. And it was so hard, like that constant kind of expressing, sterilising, trying to breastfeed, bottle feed. It was just like really tough. There was no way I could have done it by myself. I think if I'd have just said, right, okay, I'll just express and bottle feed then, it might have been different. But obviously I was desperately trying to breastfeed as well. And there was just like not enough time in the day. So when my husband went back to work, my mum very, very kindly and luckily could come to me every single day and just help, you know, and her kind of job, her like role was like just constant like sterilising and just helping, because it was so difficult. So not long after that, so some point kind of between he was 2 weeks to 3 weeks old, my supply just seemed to dwindle. Like I was expressing and nothing was coming out, and like the whole day, which now I know probably wasn't a good thing, but the whole day I was just like attached to the pump pretty much. Nothing was coming out, I couldn't get anything. And like I think before that he'd kind of been like catching me up, so I was like expressing, put in the fridge, expressing, put in the fridge, and it was kind of like, you know, I'd express, he would have that, I would express, he would have that, and like, yeah, he was just catching me up, so I had like no extra in the fridge sort of thing. And then like my supply just seemed to, I just seemed to like dry up, and I think it was probably just the stress, to be honest, and maybe it didn't help being constantly on the breast pump. So my husband had to urgently, quite urgent, like go out. Luckily we had like a little shop by us that sold formula, and he just had to buy it, and we had to kind of give Arthur that day. As you can imagine, for someone that really wanted to breastfeed, all of this, like one tongue tie, second tongue tie cut, now he's not going on the breast, now I've had to give him formula. It was just, I just felt I was just on this like slippery slope. It was so hard, like mentally and emotionally and physically, really tough. Having said that, around that time Arthur did actually go on. Now I'm not saying he had a feed, I don't know, probably didn't, but like he actually opened his mouth and, you know, latched, kind of like clamped onto me. And I think at first, like the first few times, or probably like for a little while, it was probably more with like his gums, if you see what I mean, probably just kind of like biting me, but he did go on to me. The health visitor weighed him, and at 3 weeks old he still wasn't back to his birth weight, and that's when she said, yeah, I don't really think the midwife should have kind of discharged you to us. Like she wasn't really that pleased about that. So she kind of had a plan, you know, she's like, you know, you need to express 7 times a day, and I was kind of like, I am doing that, but there's just nothing coming out. But, you know, she just said, you know, try him at the breast, and then, you know, obviously give him your expressed milk, and, you know, if needed, top him up with formula. So we did do that, and, you know, the formula I didn't actually need for that long. I can't remember, it was probably like a couple of weeks, and it was only for like maybe like equivalent of a feed in 24 hours. So gradually kind of my supply obviously got better, and I kind of caught him up, and I also had like an oversupply, like an extra supply in the fridge, which kind of like, but like mentally it made me feel good, but it also made me a bit panicky, because it was always like, oh no, I've only got X amount of bottles in the fridge. Like I always kind of had that anxiety that my supply was going to dip again. So because he had latched, I did have this little glimmer of hope that kind of maybe we are getting there. The health visitor said, well, perhaps his tongue is probably just a bit sore still, you know, it's still like fairly early days since it, so just like keep going. So the health visitor, I think luckily, she said, well, she referred me to the specialist, and she said they had a chat and they nearly thought I didn't need to see her, but then they said, well, let's just see her, which I'm so glad. So I saw the specialist, and she kind of like said what I kind of knew really about, you know, keep him close to me and do skin to skin and do breast compressions. She did see him bottle feed. He wouldn't try to breastfeed when we were there, unfortunately, but yeah, she saw him bottle feed and said like the bottles look a bit fast for him, like try and get a slower one to slow it down, because he was just like obviously got over the tongue tie thing, and he was just like gulping his milk, and then he was like really unsettled after finishing a bottle, and she said perhaps he doesn't know that he's full, like, you know, it's just too much too quickly. Now the health visitor had mentioned nipple shields, but the specialist said don't like try that yet, like just keep going. She said, you know, maybe try like express a little bit so the milk's there and then put him on. Just like tried all these various like techniques, which I kind of knew and had been, but I just kind of persisted. And I was kind of being asked by them and by other people, like, you know, well, what is your plan? Like, are you going to stop, or how long are you going to do this for? And I was just like, well, I'm going to carry on because he has latched, you know, and it just it's too kind of soon for me to quit yet. You know, he's only just had a tongue tie cut. I just wanted to carry on. The specialist also made a really good point. She said, obviously, he was used to that tongue in the womb. So the whole time he was like growing inside of me, and you know, they practice sucking in the womb, they can suck their thumb and stuff. The whole time he had this really bad tongue tie. So she said his tongue has been a real bad issue for him. So when he was about 4 weeks old, I think he was admitted to hospital. They thought he had an infection, he didn't, but he was diagnosed with silent reflux, which, you know, I think potentially, but I think reflux really, you know, as I've kind of read, it's a symptom. It's not necessarily it's not like an illness, it's just a symptom. And I personally think it was because the bottles were like too fast, he was guzzling milk and it was hurting his tummy. Then he was crying, we thought he was still hungry, so we would give him even more milk, when actually he probably had enough, he just wasn't recognising it yet. But they did give him medication, which we kind of did try a little bit, but weren't really kind of that happy. We kind of wanted to see in the slower teat bottles would help, and I think they did, which was great. But the whole time we were in the hospital, I didn't put him on me. He was attached to his like heart rate monitor on his foot, and it was just a really poorly set up room. Like the little chair that I had, like these like big arms, so like I couldn't actually like breastfeed. The bed that was in there, it was like a little pull down bed. Like I would have banged, I can't explain it, but yeah, I just couldn't breastfeed him. And I was thinking, oh no, like I haven't tried him for like 2 whole days, like what's gonna happen? But literally, like we got home and he was crying, and I just thought, right, I'm just gonna try it. And I tried, and he went on. I was like, oh my gosh, like he actually did open his mouth and went on me, which was brilliant. Another thing I was going to say, when we were in hospital, we kind of said sometimes he just cries and cries and cries and cries, like really was upset. And obviously sometimes he wouldn't always go on me either to like calm him down. So we did kind of end up getting a dummy whilst we were in hospital. And as I said in the beginning, that's something I really hadn't wanted to do and to give to him. So again, it was like another like little like kind of like stab sort of thing, or no, like another thing I hadn't wanted to do, because I'd always thought you wouldn't need a dummy because dummies are kind of like for comfort, but breastfeeding is for comfort. So it was kind of another little like a dagger through the heart sort of thing, another like little disappointment. However, from kind of around then, I suppose, Arthur would go on the breast. It was for comfort, and I know people won't believe me, because I know people say, oh, you know, people worry like they're breastfeeding if you're not getting enough, but you just got to trust me, he wasn't. I don't think he was getting anything, or very small amounts, because I didn't hear that swallow, which I had heard when he was very young, so surely I would hear it. My breasts weren't ever emptying and stuff, so yeah, I don't think he was feeding, but he was kind of just like suckling, and I couldn't ever see his like throat drop and stuff, but it kind of was just using me as a dummy, which was great because I could stop using the dummy. And yeah, he would go on me for comfort, and he would just be very happy just to be there, like suckling. At another point, the health visitor said, you know, maybe, you know, you should try the shields again. The lactation specialist said, like, no, because they can affect milk transfer. I mean, I did try it when the health visitor was there, and Arthur did feed. He did feed with it, but I just like hated it. I didn't like using them, and I kind of like struggled with it as well. They were quite big for his little mouth, I think, as well, and sometimes it wouldn't even work anyway, so I didn't really use them that much. So when Arthur was around 7 weeks old, I tried to breastfeed him without the bottle. I think the health visitor had said that when she said, you know, maybe you could start like going off bottles now. But he probably was on the boob like nearly like constantly for 5 hours, which obviously at the time I was like, oh, maybe it's just cluster feeding. Obviously it wasn't, and I think I knew that, and I didn't know that because it kind of came to like 10 PM. I thought, right, I've been doing this for 5 hours. He obviously isn't getting enough milk from me. I can't remember, I mean, he probably wasn't like really distressed because I wouldn't have kind of carried on that long, but he obviously would like come off, like cry, I'd put him back on, and he obviously just wasn't getting the milk out. Not long after that, in the morning, obviously my breasts were quite full. Overnight, obviously I expressed in the night, but like I woke up, he did actually go on and have a feed, and I heard it, you know, and it was a good however many like minutes long. So again, it was like another little bit of hope for me to like carry on going. Not that I was thinking about stopping, but for the people that said that, I was like, well, obviously there is hope because he has just done something here. It was really hard though, because Arthur was, until he was about like 3 or 4 months old, very, very sleepy. Like some days it was so hard to wake him up, you know, like really, really tough to wake him up. And it was kind of like, it was hard because obviously I'd try him on the breast. It's kind of like, well, how long do you try? Then you got to give him the bottle. So it was kind of like, and then he would like sleep, and go in a really deep sleep. So I kind of didn't want him to get behind on his feed sort of thing. So yeah, it was really, really tired. And obviously because he wasn't able to breastfeed, like he would just like fall straight back to sleep as soon as I put him there. So when Arthur was around 8 weeks old, 9 weeks old I think, and lockdown happened, and obviously my mum couldn't come in anymore. Luckily my husband could start working from home, and he could help out a bit with like the expressing, sterilising sort of thing. There wasn't much progress. It was very, very hard, because some days it would seem like Arthur would do sucking, and there was some, and then some days there wouldn't be anything, and I would just like document it all. Like some days he would go on me, some days he wouldn't, some days I'd hear like a swallow, some days I wouldn't at all. So it was just really, really hard. It always felt like we were like taking a step and then there would be like 2 steps backwards. I think my mental health really, really suffered, and I know a lot of people said, you know, and if you're watching this, of course, you know, if you feel your mental health is at that point where you can't carry on trying, then if it's the right time for you to stop, then do stop. But a lot of people said that to me, you know, don't pressure yourself, you know, you're doing really well, but you know, your mental health is more important sort of thing. But I didn't feel like I was pressuring myself. Maybe I'm just stubborn, but I just was like, I wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep going for him as well, because like I said, at that point, it's like he did want to go on me. Like he obviously wanted to breastfeed. It did calm him down. If he was upset, I just put him on me, even if he didn't get any milk out, or even if he was just getting like tiny amounts, it would calm him. So I thought, well, I'm not gonna like stop, because obviously he wants to do that, and also because there were times when he would suck. So I didn't want to like, it didn't feel like we'd reached like the end. I wanted to carry on, obviously, so I had to keep expressing as well to keep my supply there for the day, hopefully, when he would start breastfeeding. I did definitely feel like expressing was running my life though, because like I didn't really go, obviously before lockdown, didn't really like go out. It was just so hard. There was just like not enough time. I just can't explain it. I don't think people really understood either. Like if you've done expressing and stuff, the number of parts to a breast pump is crazy. You've got to like wash them all up, you know, and wash all the bottles up. And I would try to breastfeed, and you got to put all the pumps together, and then I would have to sit there and for like 20 minutes and express, and it was so tough. I think me and my husband both were really, really struggling, but I wanted to carry on. So when he was around 9 weeks old, I did message the specialist again, and you know, said we were struggling, and we did have an appointment, but then because of the lockdown it then got cancelled, unfortunately, which is such a shame. But she did call me, and then we did have a video call a bit later, and she just said maybe he's not coordinated yet. She saw a video call of you know, an attempted breastfeed, and said he's just not there yet, you know, maybe he just needs a little bit longer. So it wasn't, I mean, I'm not saying she was unhelpful, but it was just like, I guess there was just like nothing more, you know. She kind of like reiterated all the advice and stuff, and just said maybe he just needs a bit more time. I also asked about using nipple shields, and she said again like not to use them, which I didn't really mind. I think I literally tried them like twice anyway, because it just didn't feel like natural to me. And also I thought, but it's still a teat. I know it's kind of good to get them like at the breast, but it's still just a teat. So I was thinking, is that really going to help him to suck on the breast when it's just a teat like a bottle is, sort of thing? So, but yeah, she said like don't use them basically. I did ask her about doing tongue exercises. So I'd read that when babies have tongue ties cut, obviously because it's a muscle, the tongue, you are meant to do exercises where like you kind of put your finger in the mouth and do like various things to kind of help train their tongue to move in different ways, because how they suck from a bottle is very different from how they suck at the breast. And she said, oh yeah, you can try that. And I was just really kind of, I'd not been told about tongue exercises before, so at the time I was really like, why didn't no one tell me? And I was absolutely gutted that I hadn't realised myself. I was thinking, oh no, like maybe it's just like too late, like his tongue can't move that way. So when he was around 12 weeks old, my hope was just kind of like going, really, and I would just see other mums like on Instagram breastfeeding and just feel so jealous. I'd just be just so like envious of people that could breastfeed. I just really wanted it to be me. I also like hated expressing. It was like a love-hate. Obviously it was brilliant that I could do it, and I was really glad to be giving him my breast milk. Obviously, did I say, I can't remember if I said like formula stopped like ages ago, so that was brilliant, but it was just completely like running my life really, and I would just feel guilty that I would kind of want Arthur to like, oh, like, please stay asleep long enough for me to express, and then, or he'd wake up and I'd be like, oh no, like, and I thought, no, like, I'd feel really guilty for thinking that about my baby. Oh no, like, he's awake, because then it meant I couldn't express. It was just really, really hard. And I also would panic because I thought, well, if I don't express and my supply dips, like, what's going to happen then? So I think it was around when he was 4 months old. I think it was the start of a bottle aversion, which I didn't realise at the time, but he just started being a bit like funny with the, and he'd never been like brilliant with the bottle. Sometimes it was like he didn't know how to do it. I used to think, well, maybe he's getting confused. Like, I felt guilty about that as well, thinking, am I confusing him, like going breast bottle, breast bottle? But anyway, yeah, like, he just started taking longer to finish, just didn't really seem to like want it. And I think it was the start of an aversion. So eventually the only way to get him to take from the bottle was actually to lie him in like the cradle breastfeeding position and kind of like trick him into having the bottle, which I know now isn't what you should do. But that was like the only way to get him to have anything from the bottle. So that carried on, you know, I don't know, maybe like 6 weeks or so. It was just really, really awful. I think we were locked down as well at the time, so it was just horrendous. We weren't going out, like, and the whole day was kind of like centred around, is he going to have anything from the bottle? When is he going to have it? Oh, he's distressed, so he must be hungry, but he wouldn't take it. You know, I'd go into a different room, I'd try a different position, just tried like everything, and it was just absolutely awful. It was so, so stressful, and I'd spent like the early days when he couldn't breastfeed like crying every day, and then you know, and maybe I got a little bit better, and then, but with this I started crying every day again. It was just like terrible, and I just said, even if you could breastfeed, like just bottle feeding at this point, I was just like, I would just like be happy with that. But to not be able to do either brilliantly was just heartbreaking. So we did take him to the doctors, and they said he's not dehydrated. They checked him, they checked his mouth, they couldn't find anything. I think they did like a sample, they couldn't find any reason, but because he wasn't dehydrated, like, that was it, sort of thing. I called the feeding specialist, and I asked if I could try one of the supplementary nursing systems, which is basically, there's like a little tube, which one end is kind of like at your breast, you tape it down, and the other end is in a bottle, and it's kind of acts like a straw. So baby goes on the breast, but the tube goes in their mouth too, and as they suck, like, it pulls milk up from the bottle. But it didn't really work. Obviously Arthur's suck wasn't really strong enough, hence why he couldn't really breastfeed, sort of thing. But you know, it was worth the go. But yeah, that didn't really do anything. I also tried nipple shields again. I also tried not putting him on me, so I thought maybe I'll just like not do that, because it was hard, because I was thinking, well, maybe if you look into feeding aversion, you may hear of Rowena Bennett and her program, and it kind of, what I got from it was that the baby needs to be hungry enough, like desperate, to take the bottle. So, and I think it kind of says like basically to stop breastfeeding, but obviously that was kind of like the opposite of what I wanted to do. But I thought, maybe if I don't give him the breast, so he's not getting anything at all from me, so then he would be extra hungry to take the bottle, because I thought if he can't suck effectively enough to do a full breastfeed, and that's not enough, then he needs to have the bottle. So it's just really, really like tough to do that. And but then I also tried just giving him on the breast, but then he would just get really, really like upset and frustrated, because he obviously wasn't able to get a full breastfeed. I did try not expressing as well, so I thought my breasts were really, really like full, because that is when he could get the most from me, kind of like overnight when they were like full. But then I was just getting gorged. He still couldn't get enough out from me anyway. My breasts weren't emptying at all, and I again was worried about my supply, so I kind of had to carry on expressing. At one point we actually took him to the hospital, and you know, every day was kind of like, are we going to have to take him to hospital today because he's not had enough milk? So in that Rowena Bennett's program, I think she says, you know, kind of the minimum to stop a baby being dehydrated is 300 millilitres of milk, and he wasn't like having that. Also, I did for the doctors as well, and they were just kind of a bit like disinterested. They were like, there's nothing else we can do. I think they did check him like one more time, and they weighed him, and they were like, there's nothing like else we can do, like, he's not dehydrated. His weight gain had kind of evened out as well, so he wasn't, so then I knew he wasn't getting enough on me either, because his weight gain wasn't like on the chart, it was kind of like leveling out a little bit. So they're kind of like, there's nothing we can do. But yeah, one day he had like less than 300 mils, so we did take him to hospital, and they said, you know, he is hydrated. They said, we think he's got reflux, and I said we'd kind of done that before, but they prescribed 2 medications this time, and I was like, well, how is he going to have it, because he won't have the bottle. But anyway, like, we got home and me and my husband were like, we don't think that's what it is. I think potentially probably did have a bit of silent reflux at some point, but I don't think that's why he stopped feeding. But anyway, so we actually decided to not give him the medication. Anyway, we actually decided to see an osteopath, and we saw her 3 times, and I definitely think that helped. Well, I know it did, because after the 3 times is actually when he started breastfeeding properly. So around the time we were seeing the osteopath, I wasn't kind of really trying him on the breast for that long, because like I said, I knew I wanted to have him to have like enough milk. So I wanted him to have it from the bottle so that I knew he was having enough, if that made sense. So sometimes I wouldn't try him like long enough. So she used to say to me, like the second and the last time, you know, oh, you know, have you seen any improvements? And I was like, well, I don't know, I'm not really sure. And she's like, okay, well, I don't think there's anything else I can do. And I was like, oh, like, is that it? But, you know, she thought she did feel like a tightness or a weakness on one side of his neck, which is what she worked on. And she said that connects to the jaw and the tongue muscles. So that is what she was trying to improve. And she also said perhaps he's getting more milk than I thought. And like I said, people have been saying that to me like the whole way through. And I knew it wasn't the case. But at that stage, I thought, well, maybe he probably is getting more than I think he must be, because he'd had not much milk on the bottle, yet the hospital said he is still hydrated enough. You know, probably not brilliantly. Like I said, his weight wasn't great, but he obviously was getting some from me at that point. So after that, his intake on the bottle just got less and less. I think at one point, like, it did go up a bit more, and then it just like got less again. And I was trying to be really strict with myself. Like Rowena Bennett says, you know, just wait until you see hunger cues, and then like offer once. If they refuse, wait like 5 minutes, offer a second time. If they refuse again, like, that's it. Don't try it, don't keep trying, sort of thing. Don't keep trying. Which I was but it's so hard, because when you know that a baby is hungry and when he's like stressed and frustrated and upset, but not taking a feed, oh yeah, so hard. But eventually his intake just got less and less and less. But we kind of noticed that he was going on me more, and we could hear him feeding more. It wasn't brilliant, and he would really struggle, particularly on this side still, but it was definitely getting more. So one day he didn't reach 200 ml, and then the next day he didn't even have 100 ml on the bottle. But basically the hospital had said, unless there's no wet nappies for 6 hours, like, you don't need to come back. And he was still getting wet nappies, so we were like, okay, well, obviously you don't need to go to hospital. He is obviously hydrated, he might not be having loads, but he's obviously having enough. So I offered bottle a bit less, and I offered my breast a bit more, because I think, like, whereas, like, you know, going back before that, I would offer the breast before every feed sort of thing, and in between, I was kind of more so, not concentrating on the bottle, but obviously, definitely, he was at the breast less. So then I kind of switched it up and thought, okay, well, if he's hardly having anything on the bottle, let's, like, get him on the boob a bit more. But it kind of seemed that, like, in the morning and overnight he would do quite well, but then, like, in the afternoon it would just get less and less, and he would get quite upset and just make these, like, really horrible straining noises. Like, he was obviously really struggling to get milk out, and it was quite, like, sad to see. So when Arthur was just after 5 months old, I contacted and saw an independent lactation consultant. She was like a private person, because the NHS one still wasn't doing visits at this time because of the pandemic. So luckily I found this woman, and she was the only one that I found that was doing home visits, like, amazing, like a gift. Really good. So she came and spent an hour and a half, and she observed Arthur doing a feed. And I'm kind of annoyed at myself, because I probably should have showed her on this side where he struggled, but I showed her kind of on the good side. And yeah, she observed it, and she said that was kind of like a textbook feed. Like, she could see the sucks were, you know, fast to begin with, then he fed and she could see him swallowing, and then he did his little flutter sucks at the end, and she said that's good. And I said, what about a tongue tie? I'm still worried. I've not done exercises. She said, well, we don't advise tongue tie exercises because of risk of infection. She says, from what I've seen, I can't see any reason to examine him. I shouldn't want to because of the pandemic. She said, I don't see. She said, but you can send me a photo if you want, if you can get one. But she said that seemed fine. So she said, if I were you, I would stop expressing. If you get really like engorged and full, like, just express a little bit, just like a few minutes, but stop expressing. Don't offer the bottle, just stop offering it. And she said, you know, you're lucky that this was a bottle aversion, not a breast aversion, but also like well done for keeping expressing, because obviously then I've got the milk supply to breastfeed him. And that day was the very first day he didn't have any bottle at all. And I was so worried, as you can imagine, thinking, oh my God, like he's not had anything from the bottle. But she said, just keep going. So her advice was, you know, wait until he's hungry, obviously, but just like try and distract for as like long as possible to kind of get longer intervals in between breastfeeding him, so that like when he does go on, I guess probably one, my breast will be fuller, but also so that he would have a longer feed rather than kind of lots of little short ones. So that was it. So at 5 months old, just over 5 months old, he was breastfed exclusively at the breast. And you know, it's kind of the end of the breastfeeding journey, but I just kind of want to say at that point I was still really worried, as you can imagine, because I was thinking, is this just like a fluke? Is this going to stop? And I also thought, right, obviously I've kind of been expressing and a bit of breastfeeding, so my supply was probably quite a lot, like a bit of an oversupply. So I was thinking, but then if I'm just relying on him to empty my breast with maybe a tiny bit of expressing sometimes, like my supply is probably going to obviously like adjust to that. And I was thinking, is he going to be able to get milk out? If my breasts aren't like really full, is he going to be able to do it? I just always had that hanging over me. And obviously hanging over me, is he going to be averse to the breast? Because I don't think I said, he did also become a bit averse to the breast as well. Like I would get him in that position, whether it's because he knew that I'd be bottle feeding in that position, but he also would cry at the breast as well. So yeah, there was a bit of a feeding aversion in total. So I was kind of still had all these worries hanging over me, and I kind of didn't really want to like announce it. I didn't really like announce it on my baby update properly, I don't think, and on Instagram, because I didn't know if like that was it. I didn't know if he was a breastfed baby now. And like at the beginning of it, we were kind of almost like joke, oh, he thinks he's a breastfed baby, doesn't he? Like when he started getting a bit funny with the bottle. But you know, fast forward, and he was, and still is, an exclusively breastfed baby. Obviously now he's having solids. But for a while he would still struggle. Like it would seem like he would just particularly on this side, like would just really struggle to get any milk out, would just be really stressed. But gradually and eventually he just got better, because to begin with he would be on, he'd be like struggling, like moving around, like obviously I couldn't hear any swallows. But like gradually we got there, and we actually went on holiday when he was 6 months old. And I tell you what, that just showed how much our life had changed. We couldn't have done that before. When we were expressing, it was just too hard, especially with the aversion. The day that or you know, at least when it got easier, but when he started breastfeeding, our lives, like me and my husband, like just completely changed. I didn't need to worry about expressing, I didn't need to worry about sterilising, I didn't need to worry about bottle feeding, the aversion had gone. It was just absolutely brilliant. And obviously like for me, like mental health wise, like emotionally, I just felt so like, once I got over like the worry of it, when I kind of like thought, okay, this is obviously it now, he is breastfed now, like I just felt so much better. It was such a massive relief. So I was really good. Once after I saw that specialist, I didn't offer a bottle again. Like that was it. That was the last time that I offered a bottle, like the morning before she came. And I kind of expressed like maybe for a week or so in the morning, just a little bit, and that was it. So that is the end of my breastfeeding journey for this video. As I said, Arthur is now 1 year old. I've got no plans to stop. But yeah, I'm just really enjoying it, and I love it, because at the beginning I didn't enjoy it because I had that worry and that stress, and I was like, oh no, like I've always wanted to breastfeed and now he is, and I'm not enjoying it. But it was because I was worried. But now all of that has gone, and we've had, you know, a good 7 months of him breastfeeding just on me. And it is sad that we didn't have the first 5 months of that. And I, you know, like I said, it's taken me a while to film this, because I did still have that kind of upset that I just feel we kind of missed out on however many months where he could have been breastfeeding. But I just try not to think about that now. Think about the positive, and he is breastfeeding, and yeah, so it's going really well. So that is the end of this video. I really hope that it gives you some hope if you are going through any of those struggles, and if you've got any questions, then please do leave them in the comments below, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got about any of that. I'm quite an open book and happy to be really open and honest with you. Obviously, if you don't feel like you can persist like I did, maybe you're not as stubborn as me, then there is no shame in it, you know. I know how it feels, you know, you might feel guilty for stopping, but you kind of have to look after yourself too. But if you do have it in you, if you can find that extra little bit of strength to persist and go with it, then you may well find that your baby can get back to breastfeeding and that you can get there like we did. And I really, really hope for you, if you're going through that, and if that's what you want, that it can happen for you. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this one. I know it's a really, really long one, but I really hope that it helped you in some way. If you like this type of video and other mum life videos, I would love for you to comment below what you like to see, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to click the little bell and turn your notifications on so that you don't miss any other videos from me in the future. But thank you so much for watching. It really means a lot to me that you've watched this one, and it's something really close and personal to me, but I just wanted to share it with you. So yes, thank you so much, and I really hope to see you in my next video. Bye everyone.